We built this city. We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll and wood and stone and the misery of others and steel and commerce. And yes, time to talk about towns. Hello, fellow COVID-19 geeks. It is the 29th day of June in the year 2020. And it's time to discuss more world building, specifically town, city, whatever you call it, borough, hamlet building. They're all various names for a place where a bunch of people live. They get their names based upon the size. A hamlet compared to a city is usually the names refer to a certain nebulous amount of people. Like 50 people is a hamlet, but 5,000 people is a city and whatever. Doesn't really matter. You can call it a town, a city, a village, whatever you want. It's your world. But eventually you're going to have to consider, where do people live? Where do my adventurers stop and hang their hat and rest and research and refill and sell off that 27,000-pound solid ivory bathtub they found, which is a thing in a module, actually. So town. So whether the natives of your world are 2 legs, 4 legs, 6 legs, or nebulous balls of green goo, they're going to need a place to live. And usually people tend to congregate together and form what we like to refer to as towns. And throughout history, towns usually pop up around or because of a resource, or because of military needs, or because of something else. But usually something instigates the origin of that town. Most of the time, it's resource or military. Take, for example, where I live, here in California. Many, if not most, of the towns in California, especially some of the older towns in California, exist because of either the gold rush or because of the priest and the conquistadors slowly moving through the state and establishing the missions. And the missions were established usually to maintain a religious and military hold over an area. But most of our towns are gold rush towns or oil rush towns, or later towns that built up around natural resources like oranges and avocados, because I don't know if you know this, but in the old days, this state was covered in avocados and oranges and lemons before we started industrializing it. Plus, California is on an ocean, and oceans provide trade, which means towns built up along the seacoast to take advantage of the ocean, take advantage of the fish, and take advantage of the trade, of the boats being able to come in. We have very easy to navigate coastlines. We had abundant fish and wildlife that people could come in and hunt and trap and trade and leave. So we have a long history in my state of towns being built up around resources. So when deciding to put a town in your world, who built it is always okay, but why was it built? Why is that town there? Because towns aren't normally planned, with rare exceptions of like military towns. I mean, the Romans were meticulously known for their planning of towns, and militaries like towns like Oxnard, which are built up around a base and designed by the military, tend to be organized. But in normal cases, most towns are just sort of homogenous. They just sort of grew up in random ways around that resource, with really no thought to why is there a leather tanner next to a bar. Leather tanneries stink, but just sort of the way it happened. It just sort of nebulously, homogeneously grew out of the need for the take advantage of whatever resource. Now, so why is your town there? So, main reason a town is built usually is, like I said, you have a military town, Medieval Europe, full of these, with motte and baileys, which would become castles, which would become towns around, built inside the walls of the castle, and then slowly the town would expand outside of the walls of the town castle until you have places like Leeds or whatever, or London, or Germany, or just these vast cities built around a central castle or central fort. Or maybe it's a town that was built along a road, because again, commerce and trade are usually the second reason, and probably the more frequent reason, a town is built up, to take advantage of a resource. So that resource could be water, or that resource could be land. That resource, like here in California, could be abundant mineral resources like gold and oil. That resource could be farmland, whatever. The town is usually built up to take advantage of a resource, or to take advantage of a military situation, hold the land, guard the people, whatever. It doesn't really matter. We just know that towns are usually built up around to take advantage of a situation or a resource. So why was your town built? And then your town will slowly homogenize, spread out around the central thing, be it a waterway. Now, one mistake I see a lot of in towns, especially fantasy towns, is people think it's cool to build the town really close to the water, or even like have a river running through the water. Well, because London has the Thames. What people forget is that rivers flood. So when you have this cool town with the river going through it and the 27 bridges, but you forget that, that river's going to flood. And all that land along the edge of the river and all those cool buildings and that crystal castle flood. So while building a town on a waterfront is very cool and very realistic, remember that waterfront is going to rise and lower and possibly flood. So, and your town people would have known that probably after the end of their first year being there, and would have built the town to deal with the fact that that water source floods, rises and lowers. So remember that. There's a little little pointer. So what is the resource that your town is taking advantage of? And then your town will slowly just sort of grow up homogenously around the original whatever resource. Now, I know there's a lot of pictures and maps of towns where the village is sort of spread out. But that's not really the way towns happen. Towns happen and they're usually very close together. Buildings are often on top of each other or really close to next to each other. The idea of, I have a yard and I don't want to see my neighbors is a relatively new idea. Yards and not wanting to see your neighbors. That's not a thing until relatively recently in history. Mostly it was people were just sort of crammed against each other because they wanted to take advantage of most of the space that they could. And of course, towns also need to defend themselves with the things outside of the town, and building buildings close together means people can work together to put out a fire or go stop the locusts or go stop the invading whatever, nebulous green globs. Of course, towns close together, as history has all showed us, means that they become a festering pit of disease. Yay, dysentery. In fact, until the invention of soap, plagues and diseases would just rush through towns. Because when you have a bunch of people on top of each other, diseases spread. Which is part of the reasons why, as history progressed, that idea of putting a town on top of each other began to maybe putting this building right next to this building is not such a close idea, because if this guy gets sick, then chances are this guy's going to get sick too. But in the old days, historically, as the town was built around this resources, the buildings tended to just sort of grow up, but they tended to take up not a lot of space. They wanted to use as much land as they could. They wanted to take advantage of what space that they had, because they did not know how that space was going to change. It's rain, forest fire, snow, dust storms, rampaging herds of sandwich cattle. They didn't know. Natives getting angry, whatever. stupid neighbors with a water pressure machine. They didn't know. So the buildings were built close together. They're built sort of homogeneously. They just sort of happened. They weren't necessarily planned. And they were usually built with the initial source in the center. So if your town's built along a road, because roads provide trade. Let's look at Route 66. Many of the towns and cities along Route 66 were to take advantage of the people coming and going and to try and get them to come off Route 66 and see the world's largest ball of string or eat, my spaghetti and meatballs or visit my little teeny zoo or come and see this cave, whatever. Towns are built to take advantage of that resource. Towns along roads were usually take advantage of travelers along the road and the land around the road. What does this land around this road provide? Is it farmland? Is it woodland? Is it mining land? Is it fish land? Is it sandwich land? What is the resource that I can sell, trade, whatever, with the people along the road? And those will be the buildings that slowly develop around that center idea of the town along the road. Same with the town along a waterway or near an ocean. I'm here to take advantage of that ocean and what that ocean provides me. Ample fish, ample wildlife like beavers and minks and stuff like that. It's foggier, there's more water, which means it's the land is going to be more trees and whatever takes, all that other stuff and rocks and things that take advantage of ocean. So the town would build it up sort of homogeneously around that ocean or that river and the resources that ocean river provides and the areas that we want to take advantage of. We still want to be kind of close to each other because that's just how homogeneously towns sort of developed. So a mining town is built up around the mine, and the initial buildings would be the buildings that house the miners and support the mine. And then future buildings would be buildings that take advantage of the fact that there's miners who now have money and want to spend it. And then the next set of buildings would be, well, these miners have families and they want to bring their families and have them live close to them. So that would be the next set of buildings. And the next set of buildings would be, well, these families have needs. How can I fulfill those needs and take advantage of this money that's coming out of this mine? So that would be the next set of buildings, and so on and so on and so on. But then mines usually inevitably run out. The successful towns that are mining towns find ways to continue to support themselves once the mine has run out. Is there another resource we can continue to take advantage of? Or is there a way we can take advantage of the fact that we're here, but the mine is gone? Oh, the railroad's coming through. A road's coming through. That always helped towns stay open. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or did the town die because the mine wore out, the resources wore out? All things to consider. So when building your town in your world, whatever your world is, towns usually follow the idea of, why did somebody build this here? What are they taking advantage of? So towns just don't randomly happen. There has to be a reason why that very first building, that very first guy went, this is a good place to put a whatever. And 90% of that time is going to be to take advantage of a resource. That resource could be a road. That resource could be a waterway. That resource could be a gold mine. That resource could be oil. That resource could be the magic enchanted emerald crystal that accumulates cosmic energy in this one spot. Or, that resource could be hydro asso, the thing that powers your spaceship. It doesn't matter. The town's going to be built up usually to take advantage of a resource or because of a military. Mott and Bailey, we're going to build this fort here to hold this land, and then the fort builds a wall around it, and then some people live inside the wall, but then there's too many people, so they start spreading outside of the wall, and then whatever, some cow kicks over a lantern and sets the entire city on fire. Why was your town built there? What resources is it taking advantage of? What perpetuates the town remaining there and prevents the town from just burning away like so many Gold Rush and Route 66 towns because the town no longer provides a need? I mean, literally, most of the buildings along Route 66 died out because 20 feet away, there's a completely different highway, and people started using that highway instead of Route 66, and they didn't have to turn off anymore, and the cars were faster, more economical, so blah, 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 blah. Whatever. We'll design a town next time to show you how some of these ideas work. But for now, that's 15 minutes of me talking about towns, which you're probably bored of, so we will move on. Talk to you losers later. Oh, I wish I knew what was going on with my voice. And yeah, I need a haircut.